Hello again YouTube. In the video that follows this introduction you're going to see the whole process of a professional engineer squaring a panel saw. Not this saw, this is my old workshop that we're moved out of now. In fact we're packing up to move house. This is at the bottom end of my garden. Moved into a new workshop, got a panel saw, and I was in the perhaps unusual position of having never used the panel saw before but purchasing one because it was part of the next step for my business. So if you also don't have that background in seeing a panel saw used and set up, or even if you do but you've never been entirely sure how to correctly square it, then the video coming up is for you. Now I've put below this in this introduction the timestamps to get to particular parts you might want to just jump straight to, but I'm doing the intro just to say that this was originally an Instagram video, which is why it's in the vertical format. So if you're watching it on YouTube on a device, it's going to just work a bit better if you turn it to portrait mode. It's a bit of an experiment. Since back end of last year, I became quieter on YouTube, but I was still actually very active on Instagram. However, some people have said to me they don't use Instagram or they don't like Instagram, and couldn't I put some of that content on YouTube? So I'm just having a little go at screen recording it from Instagram and uploading it in this way. Apologies if it looks a bit odd, if it's a bit choppy. It's just the nature of Instagram stories. The benefit of Instagram is I've been able to upload things a lot more instantaneously and get the content out there alongside being very busy building a business. So that's why I've done it. I'm still trying to share things in a way that I can actually make work. As I say though, I'm going to have a go at moving some of that over to YouTube. So looking for your feedback. This is going out to members only at the membership site first. But if you're seeing this on public YouTube, then I must have got enough good feedback that I decided it was worth sharing on YouTube. I hope it helps. The machine that we are using a lot and is working is just not square, and it's a little bit beyond us to get it as square as it can be. Thankfully, after a lot of ringing round, I found Markfield Woodworking Machinery, a guy called Rob. He's just getting his tools from the vans now, one of their engineers. They've come out and I'm hoping they're going to save the day, because Rob's just taught me through how you square something up, and he clearly knows what he's talking about. So I'm going to try and summarise what he does. Yeah, I got cut off there, but Rob's just been talking me through issues of sort of running things parallel with the blade, getting them square, and he's going to tune everything up. He says what he does is he starts with getting the sliding carriage running parallel, then he goes on to this being square with the 5-cut method, then he goes on to this. But he says there's always an element of compromise where things don't always quite run perfectly, and particularly with this machine, this very old second-hand Wadkin, Gavin, who runs Markfield, he's saying to me, yeah, these are notoriously difficult to square, so we know it's not an easy thing, but we'll see how we go. So first thing Rob's identified is that the sliding carriage is veering off a little bit, so it's sort of cutting a little bit away from the blade as it travels. So he's moving the whole undercarriage, or whatever it's called, which means loosening that big nut there and adjusting these stops at the side. Here, carry on, Rob. Really interesting thing that Rob said, and this shows why getting an expert in is good, because we have researched all ways of squaring a panel saw. The way Rob's saying he does it is by ear, which had never occurred to me. And he says you're looking for, was it 4 sounds you say, Rob? Right, we're having a bit of trouble Instagram losing video. Rob, talk us through that 4 cut sounds.
So basically what you're going to do, you're going to cut this piece of material now. The first is the cut. It will run through the back of the blade, where you'll hear the material rub against the back but not cut. So it's almost touching but not quite. Then it comes back through there again, you'll hear the sound again, and then when it gets back to the front of the blade, you'll hear a very similar sound to the cut. What this is doing is proving that the table is parallel to the blade but without back cutting. I'll fire it up and then you'll be able to hear it.
Great. So that noisier cut, then the rub, All right, folks, so what I'm really trying to do here is make the video that I wish I could have found when we were trying to square this up. So the last segment that you saw there, what Rob did was he cut this piece of board, which is roughly 1200 by 1200. He did a cut, butted up against the squaring fence, and then he does it in this order. Another cut on this side, cut on this side, a cut on that side. So and then a fifth cut on the same side. So you cut in and then you turn that cut towards the fence. So then once you've gone right round, you've done 4 cuts, you do your fifth cut here as well, and what you're actually doing is taking a strip off. You would have seen then he took that strip, he just nicked the ends off, purely so that he could put one end against the other, and he's laid it down. That's the thickness, that's the cut he's taken. He's laid one end against the other, and he's got an inaccuracy of 3 millimeters. So what we've got is a difference of 3 millimeters. Now the 5-cut method is compounding the problem, so you get to see it really clearly. If we've got 3 millimeter difference over 4 cuts, divide it by 4, you've actually got, I guess that's 3/4 of a millimeter that it would have been out of square on 1 cut at this particular size of board. The 4-cut method helps you really see it. What he's then done is he's gone to square the fence, which on this particular model is done by adjusting these nuts, because what they do is they pull this position, which pivots then off where it engages on this position. So squaring the fence by that method, back and forth, trial and error, until he's done the whole process again, and he's got this down to 0.06?
It was 0.06 of a millimeter.
0.06 of a millimeter. Yeah, so what we ended up with was an inaccuracy, if you can even call it that, of 0.06 of a millimeter, which you actually want to divide by 5, because it's a 5-cut method, to get the inaccuracy on a single cut. So very, very tiny inaccuracy, more than good enough for us. Couple more things to say. Another way you can check square is you could put a big sheet on, butt it up, cut it, flip it like that, so you're referencing off the same edge, and then you could check, once you've cut your piece, let's just say it's a big long piece, you could then check the variance between this measurement and that measurement, and that would show you something. That there's an issue with this where you could do your diagonal check, and you might have, I'm not sure what the name of it is, a trapezoid or whatever, it could actually measure the same on the diagonal with this method. So you can get on to the next step. We know this board is very square. We've butted it up against the crosscut fence, and now Rob's brought the rip fence up tight to the board, and we can see that the rip fence is a bit off, just a bit of a taper there, so it's touching at the far end, a little bit of a gap here. So now he can set that to parallel. But Rob, you're saying it depends how we want it, because we might want it ever so slightly off parallel to avoid a back cut, right?
Some people, if they use it as a stop and you're using the fence in this position, want it dead parallel, but it will bind. So if you want to run it parallel, from the centre of the blade to the front of the blade is where you want it, somewhere around there, and then it won't bind on the back edge of the blade. If you want a slight gap here, and it is a slight gap, less, sort of about 1/10 of a mil, and it won't catch the back teeth and fire back.
So the rip fence is correctly set up now. With this large piece, it's butted up against the cross-cut fence. We know that that's landing square, and Rob has set the rip fence to have just a hair's breadth. If it's tight here now, just a hair's breadth off, which means that it's got a bit of relief as it goes through. The workpiece is just going to clear the back teeth, which will reduce the chipping as it comes out. We have a bit of an issue. If you just swap that big one over. When we're working with a smaller piece, again, we're wanting to rely on the cross-cut fence for squareness. Rob says that's best practice. We shouldn't really use this as a standalone rip saw. You're always relying on the sliding carriage. But because this is such an old saw, like 30, 40 years old maybe, all that usage with the pressure mostly here over the years means that this is ever so slightly worn. So as he puts that tight against this fence, what we see is a little bit of a little bit of a taper here, so we just have to be conscious that we don't want to push a small piece too tight to there, because we know that's going to kick out a little bit off square because of the wear.